We're visiting with Kaleen Knopp. She's a teacher at K-State Salina, and she works a lot with writing. And of course, Kaleen, you and I have been visiting about our interest in writing across the curriculum and how can we help teachers and students achieve in this area. Tell us a little bit about how you got interested in writing across the curriculum.
Well, in a number of different ways. First of all, I'll mention that Patricia Ackerman, who also teaches at K-State Salina, and I are going to be co-directors of a new writing center that we're opening on the Salina College campus. We're opening in January 2005, and our purpose in the writing center is many faceted.
Sure.
We will be a writing center for faculty to come to meet with us and with other faculty to work on cross-curricular writing development, assignments, programs. We'll keep on file writing assignments that faculty are doing, and we'll also be working directly with them on the creation of rubrics and terminology, kind of rhetorical vocabulary that faculty can use for their assignments. What our goal is for the purposes of assessment and also for the purposes of student learning, we all know that students need to be able to communicate better, because that's the feedback that we get from industry and from our assessment teams and from everyone.
You had mentioned that earlier when we were visiting, that every time there's an assessment or you get feedback from industry, those things come up.
Right.
Better communication in writing and in other ways.
Verbally,
but we know most teachers at K-State really are interested in teaching writing and they're interested in having students who can write well, communicate well. And we want to include it in our classrooms, but it's like, how do you do it without it killing yourself? And,
And not only do you do it without killing yourself, but how do you do it? I mean, how can you create some kind of a program so that student learning is consistent, so that it's connected, so that students aren't getting completely different things and different expectations from different faculty members?
On our DVD, we're going to have some people from the English department, and we teach writing, and I think they teach it well. But it's something about the student, they don't carry it on.
Right.
Even with the professors in English and other professors encouraging them, it's like they don't realize it transfers into everything you do, really.
Right. So then the question for our faculty is, what can we do as faculty members to create programs and assignments that will encourage the transfer of that knowledge from course to course and all the way through the degree program? I'm on the UGE Council, and we're currently right now working on a proposal that's come to the council requesting an upper level UGE course, which is writing intensive. And its whole purpose is to be writing intensive across the disciplines and be an active learning environment and all the other things that the UGE courses do. But most of the people on the UGE Council, of course, who are from all different colleges throughout the university, asked, how do you develop a course like that? So I pulled out some rubrics and said, here's how you do it. So on the UGE Council, and we've worked a little bit with Provost Nellis on this, we've been looking at some rubrics just to say it is feasible if you have the right tool. I'm also going to say one more segue point that sort of connects these things together. I work level in the state of Kansas with the course and curriculum development team for writing K through 12. And we have, as many of you may know, in our state and across the nation, we often use a 6-trait writing rubric. So any student who's grown up in the public schools in most of the United States is familiar with that 6-trait writing rubric. It has been successful in a lot of ways because it allows teachers of writing, writing is something that just grows in increments. It isn't like calculus where you just take it a semester, you don't know it at the beginning and then you know it at the end. Writing isn't like that. Writing begins at a very young age with reading and literacy, and it builds all the way through to the end of a person's life.
That's right.
Exactly. It isn't just a little blip of a semester thing that you take. So what's important is that we learn how to connect all of those, I'm going to use the metaphor of a puzzle pieces together so that they build, so the student can connect the knowledge from one place to the next. So at a more sophisticated level at the college and university, that is a more sophisticated level in the K-12 program, we use a similar ideology in that we have a simple rubric that is complex in its usefulness, but the terminology is simple and it can be applied in all different kinds of courses. For example, we use these criteria: focus, purpose, development, tone and style, language conventions. Those are our basic 5. And they're a little bit more sophisticated than the 6th trait that people will recognize from public school. But they're connected. You know, they're just a slightly different spin on the same idea. All of our degree programs here at K-State require expository writing for the degree. Sometimes Expos 1 and Expos 2, sometimes just Expos 1 and technical writing, but every student, if a student takes their writing training here at K-State, they should have been exposed to this terminology. What we can do then with other teachers, and what Patricia and I have been working on, and many others on our campus, Judy Collins, who teaches technical writing, has developed a wonderful cross-curricular writing assignment with our chemistry professor, Dr. Jung Oh. Dr. Collins and Dr. Oh have done this fabulous collaborative writing cross-curricular thing with the technical writers in Dr. Collins' class and the chemists in Dr. O's class, and they do some kind of a thing with paper, I don't know, paper testing, and then they write about it, and we just have a number of cross-curricular writing programs happening on our campus in Salina. We're able to do that because we're such a small campus, and we have computer scientists, mechanical engineers, construction scientists, writing instructors, humanities instructors, all in the same building or in connected buildings, so that we can actually come together and sit and have a cup of coffee and visit and plan. Another example that we're using is Bill Genero, who is a web development design teacher. Bill and I have been working together on developing cross-curricular writing assignments that he can use in his web development classes.
Oh, that's great.
So what I gave to Bill is a copy of my basic rubric, and it says, you know, an A paper meets these criteria, and it's explained in detail. A B meets these criteria, C, you know, D, and so on. We often actually just assign A, B, C, or R for revise until it, you know, reaches the passing level. So we have a process.
I think the writing here does that, K-State campus. Can you give some tips to all of us about rubric development?
Bill and I sat down and we just talked through, and Bill had already, of course, written out his writing prompt and that sort of thing. So we talked through and looked at what exactly he wanted this writing assignment to do, or these writing projects, plural, to do. Each of them had specific criteria that were unique, you know, to each assignment. But they also had criteria that were consistent all the way across. So I said, all right, Bill, let's do in your web development class what we do in our writing classes. I'm going to backtrack for just a minute and say that in our writing classes for expository writing 1 and 2 and for technical writing and some of the other things that I teach, we have, of course, individual essay assignments all the way through. We have debate essays, proposals, you know, interview assignments, profiles, persuasive research. We have all different kinds of assignments. And the question then for all of us is, how do you take all of these different kinds of assignments that have different requirements, you know, different rhetorical requirements, and create a consistency in the teaching and the assessment so that students feel like it all makes sense to them and ties together? Well, the way that we do this is we take our basic criteria: focus, purpose, development, tone and style, and language conventions, which is a big category. You know, that includes spelling, punctuation, sentence structure, all those things. And for every assignment, we make a list of questions. Does this essay have a clear claim? And then on the chart, which you can see, as an instructor, you can build your chart however you want. What we do is we have a category for insufficient, and a second category for adequate and or satisfactory, and a third category for above average or excellent. So we ask questions that question the student, and the student receives a copy of this rubric before they write the essay so that they can do their own self-assessment while they're writing, during their drafting.
Have you seen a difference, Kaleen, since you've used rubrics? Because I know you've taught a while.
Absolutely. And students love it, because students say, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do.
Yes.
You know, people say about writing, it's such a gray area. And we need to make it, you know, it's hard for students to swim in that gray area if they don't have clear criteria to guide them. So what we're trying to do is make it more black and white.
Right.
I hate to use that terminology, but, you know, just to go
More
with
clear.
the gray, more clear, more specific. Students like it because, especially at our college, because we're a college of technology and aviation, we have a lot of very linear sequential engineering, computer scientists, and it is really helpful for them to have a very concrete chart.
Sure.
Instead of just teacher comments, we also do lots of teacher comments. But even the teacher comments are directed toward the same criteria that are listed on the rubric. So for all of our different expository writing essays, we ask a different series of questions that apply to each essay.
And to each assignment.
And to each assignment. I'm going to use the persuasive research for an example, and then I'll come back to Bill. In the persuasive research, they know the criteria because we've been studying all semester in Expos 2. What does a good piece of persuasive argumentative rhetoric do? Well, it has a clear claim. It has logical subclaims. It has logical critical thinking and reasoning to support those subclaims. It provides excellent credible evidence and examples to add credibility to the subclaims. You know, so there are all these criteria that a good argument will do. So we take those criteria on the rubric chart and we list them one by one. As I said, does this essay have a clear claim? Does this essay have logical subclaims? Is the reasoning sound and not based on logical fallacy? And of course you have to teach logical fallacy. Are the examples and the pieces of evidence connected to the subclaims and also connected to the thesis? Those kinds of questions, you know, but each of the questions, which is unique to the persuasive research essay, falls very directly into one of those criteria categories. So the question about is there a clear claim, that's about focus and purpose. Are there enough examples and evidence? That's about development. But we put on the rubric which criteria each of those questions is a part of.
So the student can focus right to the rubric from the assignment.
Absolutely.
And it directs their attention to
Right. They have it ahead of time. They use it for peer editing. You know, they do peer editing with their own assignments. And then they, of course, know that their essay will be evaluated by their faculty member with that same criteria. So it isn't a mystery to them. It makes it very concrete all the way through. What then I did with Bill, I'll keep this short, but in his web development class, is we took the same criteria from the basic rubric chart, and then we developed questions for each of his writing assignments. What is, you know, has this page on your, you know, I'm not a web design person, so, you know, but does this web link accomplish blank, whatever it's supposed to accomplish? And that's purpose, so he can put that in the category of purpose. You know, does this have good language conventions? And then you can list them individually, spelling, punctuation, you know, sentence structure, those types of things. You can break that down however much you want to. And then if you want to use those three categories, insufficient, average, or above average, then you can just check them off. You can give it back to the student, and they can see clearly, this is where I'm on track and this is where I'm off track. And you may be able to see that with this process, which is a very simple process, you can create assignments for writing in any discipline with those criteria that the students will recognize. And I'll end with this, students start to see a pattern, and we tell them, you'll see a pattern in your own writing. If you tend to not have clarity of purpose in this assignment, chances are you will also struggle with clarity of purpose through all your assignments or clarity of focus. If you tend to not have enough development in this assignment, you start watching, you'll see that that's a trend you have. So then the students and their instructor can start troubleshooting that area.
And they know where they need to be more careful to help themselves.
And learn how to do it.
Learn
skills how to do it.
It's interesting to me, and if I were someone watching our DVD, I would think, well, Kaleen's a writing teacher. Of course she writes and she can do it, but what does that mean to a music person? And what I was thinking about is, like I had them my class go to the Veterans Day Parade.
Okay.
And they were supposed to write their reaction to being at that parade and what they noticed about music during the parade. And now I've got these papers back, and I want to do a rubric so that I can see who's got an A, who's got a B, who's got a C.
Okay.
And one of the things I told them, and I don't know if this falls into the traits or not, but I wanted to feel like I'd been there with them. I was there, but I wanted to feel like I'd been there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that they do write correctly, and I know
conventions.
the convention is right, and so I said for an A paper there could be no typos or grammatical. I'm so old to call them grammatical errors.
This is what we all do. I mean, an A paper essentially has to be perfect.
Has to be no error, and then a B paper. I think I gave them one. These were my really basic rubrics that I just put on an email to them.
Right.
And then for the C paper, I think I gave them 2. I was pretty stiff on the error part of it, but then it's that other part that I have trouble.
Right.
You know how we who aren't in English, we could say, I know it's a good paper, but how do I convey that to them?
Exactly.
And that's where I struggle.
And that's where we use the terminology. So if you came to me, or someone else who does some of the work that I do, and said, okay, I want to make a writing assignment that is accessible, that is able to be evaluated in the way that students will understand.
And that they'll understand what happened.
Right. And I also want to throw in here, we just, at our campus in Salina, just within the last week, we've had our national evaluation team, our ABET team.
The whole time you've been talking, I've been thinking about accreditation.
Yes.
Because we're all looking at that.
Yes.
Everybody.
And
everybody
the
goes
number
through
one
it.
focus for that whole process is assessment. How do you assess?
Mm-hmm.
You say that you have a student learning outcome for communication. How do you assess this?
Yeah.
Show your documents. Show your evidence that allows us to see how you assess that.
Right.
The chart, the rubric.
Sure.
This is how we can do it. And we already do this in the English department. And if you visit with Dave Smith or Linda Brigham or Deborah Murray or Robin Mosher, or Karen Westman, they can talk about this at length. Let's say that we want to do with your assignment something similar to what Bill and I are doing. So first of all, I would just ask you, just tell me what it is that you want the assignment to do, and then you would explain what you just explained. And I would say, okay, then what you want from them is external detail. That is, what are they seeing with their 5 senses? That is, what do you see with your eyes? What do you hear with your ears? Maybe what is the texture? What is the weather like?
And I just briefly, I've looked at them, and one of them talked about it was our first cold day. Yes. And so it was cold.
It made it more real to you.
And that's right.
Right. So in an assignment like this, and different assignments have different rhetorical purposes, this is an expressive assignment that you're asking them to do.
These are all going to be teachers, elementary teachers.
Okay, so you'll know the 6 straight rubrics then. If you're elementary teachers, or hopefully you will. You're asking them to be informative, expressive, and reflective. Those are the 3 rhetorical purposes that your assignment is asking them to do.
Right.
So then you go to the next step and say, how do we achieve those 3 rhetorical purposes? And I can tell you, or a writing faculty person could tell you, what you're asking for is external description and internal description. So now we're going to take those 2 categories and break them down into parts. What does external description mean? How do you teach it, and how do you assess it? Here's how you do it. You say to the student, take your 5 senses and write down details. But if you tell them ahead of time, they can do it better. And if you give them what we call a sensory detail chart to fill out, or to write out, or to even to make in their mind as they're watching, then they can do it even better, because it makes it concrete. So they write down some details they see with their eyes, colors. They write down texture details, like the temperature of the air, or maybe a rough bench they're sitting on. Because it's a music class, you probably would really want them to focus mostly on sound details. So you might even say you need to have 10 sound details that you write down, a lot of sound detail. What are our other senses? Smell. What's the smell? Is somebody near you sipping on a cup of hot coffee? Are you getting a little drift of that aroma?
And even taste, because they were throwing candy and they all had candy.
Exactly. So that's how they can build the external detail, is with their 5 senses, and you just can show them a sample of how to do that. Now, the internal detail is where reflection comes. So external detail is expression. I'm oversimplifying in general. Internal detail is what we call reflection. So when we ask our students in our writing classes to, say, write a personal autobiographical narrative, we say you need to build external detail by using your 5 senses, and we teach them how to do it. And students love it. There's like, I always knew how to make a story, but I didn't always know how to make my story interesting. But using the sensory detail allows it to reach out to the reader, and we tell them, so your reader can smell what you smelled and see what you
That's
saw,
right.
you know, and
see, on my assignment, I didn't know how to do that.
Right.
And so I just said, I want to feel like I was there with you.
Mhm.
That was what I told them, but it's not enough.
Right.
And I think that's often how we assign.
Right.
And I'll get some that are very good. They would have been very good without me. But my goal is to help those that aren't so very good get better.
Right.
And so that's what.
And to give them tools.
Mhm.
What so often happens in writing, we hear this all the time, this is overgeneralizing, but I'm just going to paraphrase it, is these kids can't write well.
I know.
And we, in the field of writing, say they have to be taught. They have to be given clear guidelines. They need to know the criteria. You know, it's interesting, in English classes, English is always clumped together. So in an English class in middle school, elementary, middle, and high school, an English teacher is for the most part expected to teach grammar, spelling, vocabulary, literature, drama, poetry,
Speech.
composition, rhetoric,
Yeah.
speech. You know,
Yeah.
it's just all
A
clumped
lot,
together.
a lot.
And so at the college level, we have the opportunity to really sort out those criteria
That's
because
right.
this is just a class in writing. But our students are given so much information, and our teachers at the K through 12 level are asked to do so much in their English classes that it's sort of no wonder that these kids
We have that
aren't very
feeling,
skilled
yeah.
writers, because where in their training are they just taught only composition for? It takes us years to learn to write well.
Yeah.
You know, we have a lot of faculty who are average writers.
Well, and one thing in doing the research on this DVD project that I've been told by a lot of people who do a lot of writing, every discipline is a little bit different too about
Right.
what we want.
Exactly.
Like the music discipline is going to be
Right.
different from the engineering
Yes.
discipline. And yet we want our students, especially our K-State grads,
Right.
to get out of here and be
Uh-huh.
able to do a good job
Mhm.
with expressing themselves on paper. And-
Absolutely. And it is in creating the custom designed rubrics that we can work toward achieving that. So in your rubric for your writing assignment, then, we would make another category, internal description or reflection, and then we would ask questions. What were you feeling,
Yeah.
you know, at an emotion level as you watched the band go by?
That's right.
What were some of your thoughts? You can quote some of your thoughts in quotation. You can craft specific questions, kind of like Bill has done for his web
Right.
assignment. He can craft specific questions to ask the students that they can look at and say, oh, okay, I'm supposed to do this. I need to make sure that this question is answered in my piece of writing, so that it ceases being so vague and gets more concrete.
Right.
And generally, one of everyone's major problems with writing is we tend to be vague and speak in generalities
right.
instead of concrete.
And it's a little bit hard when you're not in that area. That's one thing we want the DVD to do, is to help people create these meaningful rubrics that will help their students.
Right. And I think that the questioning technique is a useful one, because it isn't very difficult for a faculty member like yourself or like Bill to come up with questions getting at, what do I want this to do? Like, does it describe the sounds effectively?
Sure.
Does it describe the atmosphere? Do I feel like I'm there? When you can make a series of questions.
I wanted them to be aware of how much music adds to an event in
Yes.
life,
Yes.
like a parade. You
Yes.
know? And that's what I really want them to become aware of, how much music adds to our life. And we
Right.
all know that there's music at graduation, music at weddings, or music at the events in our life.
Right.
And sometimes we take it for granted. And of course, in my area, we're wanting to focus that attention.
Yeah.
And that's just my area. But then we've got all these other areas too.
Well, and the reason I reacted with such enthusiasm to that is because one of our neat assignments that I like very well, and students seem to enjoy in the expository writing classes, is we have them write what we call an angle of vision assignment, where they observe a scene, and you could translate this assignment really well to this project. We have them observe a scene for about 20 minutes, or it could be a piece of art. Usually we have them do a scene because it has all the 5 senses. And they describe that scene with internal and external detail, like we've talked about, the internal being self-reflective. They describe that scene then from like a positive angle of vision. If you were to just look at all the positives in this, how would you describe it? Then we have them shift perspective and look through another lens of, another angle of vision, and describe that whole scene again from a negative perspective. So you could even have some fun with that assignment and say, okay, I want you to describe this scene twice. I want you to describe it as everything that it is with the music. And then I want you to write another paragraph just for fun. See if you can describe everything
what it would be like
without the
That's
music.
That's a great idea.
How different would it be?
That's a great
idea. So you
idea.
can really be creative and have some fun with, and then coming back to these criteria, focus, purpose, development, organization, conventions, and those criteria, then after you've crafted all your questions, you can just figure out, and it isn't difficult to see, which category would this question fit in.
Sure.
Well, this is about focus, this is about purpose, this is about development, this is about organization. In other words, have they presented their material in a way that makes sense to the reader? So it's structured in a logical way.
Right. Kaleen, I know that you've worked with a lot of people because you're on UGE and you're on some of those state committees, and you and I visited a little bit about your work. You just talk with Cherie, who's in architecture, I believe. Tell us a little bit about that.
Cherie teaches architecture, planning, and design. I'm pretty sure Cherie and I just happen to be on the UGE Council together. And as we've been working on developing the proposal for possible recommendation F, which is writing intensive, that led the council to just discussing, like I mentioned before, how do faculty create writing intensive courses? How does that happen?
That's right.
So after a council meeting one day, Cherie said, I have a writing assignment that I'm doing in my classes, and I just wonder, how do I do that? So we just kind of sat down at the table and I showed her a sample rubric and said just what I told you.
Sure.
We looked at the assignment and kind of talked about some questions that could be used and how you fit those questions into the terminology, the focus, purpose, development, yada, yada. And so Sherry was planning, and she has a GTA who works with her, so she and her GTA were hoping to, well, she was actually hoping her GTA would do this, to develop a rubric chart that could be handed to students along with the writing chart, or the writing prompt when they begin their assignment, and then she has large classes, so they can all get sort of something consistent, and then that she can use again those criteria to assess their, I think that particular assignment was, I can't think of the details, but it had to do with city design and planning and arrangement and that sort of thing.